Thanks, David. Much appreciated. Thank you, everybody, for your attention. As you say, it has caught the market interest, and I think the market and the company itself are on the same page in terms of why it's an attractive project. Just move on to the next slide, thanks. And the next one. So we'll spend a bit of time on this slide. I mean, this really says it all for us. Iron ore is all about infrastructure. This region has been historically quite a long-standing producer of hematite from the Yilgarn. Previously, we had Portman, followed by Cleveland Cliffs. Originally, it was Western Mining. And most recently, Mineral Resources moved in there, upgraded the rail line to Esperance, and the port facilities have been upgraded. So they've been running at 10 million tonnes. Capacity is 11 million tonnes a year. MinRes has, I think, moved its focus now to more up near Onslow because they've got big resources there. And so there's a really, really good opportunity for us to bolt on to the existing infrastructure that's there. And obviously, we're right next to the Mineral Resources operations and pits, which we'll show you. In terms of for Forrestania, it's a deal which allows us to, as an option, allows us to drill and drill test some of the targets. Some of the targets are buried and so not exactly present to surface. We drilled during the option period to test the targets, and we're well on the way to starting that drilling program. So very exciting times for us. Gets a real step change opportunity, but I think the real thing is we can graduate to an explorer, developer to producer within a very short time frame. Next slide, thanks. This is the deal terms. As I said, it's an option fee. We on exercising the option, which will be later in the year, we will be issuing both shares and some of the listed option series we have, and then performance rights, which is again why we believe it's a good alignment of vendors and the company, because they're, as you know, with iron ore, the bulk tonnages mean a lot of potential revenue, and we're aligned with vendors in terms of trying to seek a large resource of hematite. Next slide. So I'll let Josh, you can jump in at any time, but we've been presenting this for a couple of weeks or so at the moment, so we both sort of go in and out. But basically, the current situation with Mineral Resources Yilgarn Hub, as you can see, a lot of the satellite deposits are a good road distance from their main infrastructure. They bought up a number of other companies' deposits in the area, and they have been mined and producing various tonnages. But the double handling with the rail and road transport has added to, I suppose, the cost disadvantage compared with their original asset right near the railhead at Koolyanobbing. So from our perspective, we think the location is everything, and also just what we think are some significant targets of hematite. Next slide. And I'll spend a bit of time on this slide. This sort of shows really in a bit more detail some of the just the location and logistics that the projects present. Netley, the company, owns the northern tenement there and has the iron ore rights, mining rights to the southern tenements, and has done a fair amount of work on the ground. But I think the key for us is the targets they've identified. What we've announced to date is really in relation to the southern target. That's the area boxed off in red with the yellow target areas on it. We'll get to that shortly. This is our largest target, but it's also some very proximal targets, what we call the north and the northwest target, which we will bring some more news to market in the next couple of days or week. But they present very near-term opportunities for us to to partner up with potentially MinRes, or alternatively just drill our own target area. A lot of the work done by the Netley group involves some very advanced technical targeting, and that's been really where with a lot of the work has been done. That's been matched up with on the ground geochemistry and geophysics, and some of the targets that from previous explorers and producers in the area had identified. So we feel very confident that there's a good correlation of those targets, and we've seen some significant target areas at depth.
Just touching on the history of this area. So these 3 tenements were owned by about 17, 18 different parties from the late 1990s through to now. And so we've actually packaged up a lot of the ground that hasn't been explored for iron ore. A lot of those companies did include Glyphs as well as a portion of this area. But individual holders, Michael Keel was one of the more recent ones just before we took over the ground. Western Areas, Rosebery Holdings, Semi Resources, Peter Aaron Banks, Burmese Operations, and a whole list of others. It's key to note that the exploration outside of the MinRes tenure and their mining license hasn't been focused to date on other things outside of gold, nickel, copper, that sort of things that the Yilgarn Craton is quite popular for. So we're essentially one of the first explorers for iron in these areas, which has been quite significant in terms of what we think we've discovered and what we're progressing through exploration at the moment.
Next slide.
Did you want me to touch on this one, John?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the southern target's one of our more exciting targets. There's a BIF in the northern area which stands out. It's only a very small BIF, about 5 meters thereabouts. And the rest of this target is all undercover. So it ranges from very shallow coverage where there's some sort of occurrences of rock chips and outcropping at surface, through to having no access to rock chips at surface where it's completely undercover. We do estimate that most of this is sort of around the 10 meters of cover, which is quite exciting. High magnetic signature going, the full 6 kilometers strike. And along there, we've identified a number of pockets which are on the edges of the magnetic highs, or in between multiple magnetic highs, which is a good indication of potential for hematite. So that's the main target is obviously for hematite, which is what the MinRes plant is designed to process, and what is a little bit more simple in the market to progress as a target.
Next slide, thanks.
Some of the earlier exploration, once we did our initial desktop studies, included the soil PXRF sampling, and that's helped to distinguish sort of the nearer surface anomalies along this range. In addition to that, we followed through with trying to find some rock chip samples. We were able to find a couple good hematite rock chip samples, which we've recently released to the market through Forrestania, and that's sort of confirms the presence of hematite in the northern areas as well as through to the south areas, which is quite exciting. It's just building on the data layers that we're compiling to be able to focus on drill target locations.
I'm conscious of time. I really want to try and focus on the current work and the upcoming news flow. As we've said here, the multiple shallow targets. Let's move on to the next slide, which shows just the overlay of all the data. As you can see, very good correlation between the magnetics, the targeting, the rock chips, and the other soils. So we've got our drill targets already defined, and we've got POWs over those targets already. I'll just slip to the next slide, probably most pertinent for investors. is just what the current plan is. And again, one of the things we really liked about Josh and the team, they were really hitting the ground running. A lot of the preparation work has been done. The heritage agreement had been negotiated a while ago and completed. The POW had been submitted and approved. The site visit rock chips, we announced those last week, which was very positive. Heritage survey, I think, is just about to complete or has completed, so we're not anticipating anything from that, but that will allow us to commence the first drilling program, which will comprise at least a dozen holes, we think, over the 3 target areas. We do have 24 locations to choose from. Assays, we'll be able to see fairly quickly at site, positive but confirmatory assays probably a month after drilling, maybe 6 weeks. And at that point, we'll know the validity and extent of some of these targets, which we believe can be quite extensive. So very short timetable and a lot happening. We do have some more geophysics and targeting work that the guys have been working up with maps and things that we're hoping to finalise to release in the next few days, which again is very positive. Josh, did you want to talk to any of that?
Yeah, I think the initial drill program, which is part of the due diligence drilling program, focusing on just intersecting these targets at depth. As we do that, we'll look to progress the drill planning for a full drill out, and sort of complete that, as well as the additional heritage surveys and POWs. So come sort of September, as we're getting some lab results, the company's well positioned to hit the ground running with a larger drill program and sort of drill it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Next slide, thanks. I think we can probably page through the next couple. Dave, I know you've got a few questions there, but there's clearly been a long history, and the railway, it's railway and port is third-party infrastructure. It's not related to MinRes, so there's an opportunity for us to be separate. We're not beholden to MinRes by any stretch. We do have good relations, and both Forrestania previously, but also Josh and the Netley team has been in quite regular discussion with MinRes, so that door's open. But we don't want to be in a situation where we're beholden to them. So again, Josh has done a good job with the guys in forging a fairly independent pathway potentially. But obviously, if there's something to do and it makes sense, then we certainly look at it. But the potential here and the objective is really to establish a multi-decade resource inventory, resource inventory to support a multi-decade bulk mining operation and production and shipping through Esperance, or those other options as well. And that should support, we think, a significant opportunity for shareholders and investors. We've had some really positive meetings with some quite large strategic groups and significant family office type investors, and so that's been a really positive that they're seeing this opportunity as we are as being a real step change opportunity for the company, but also to fast track a major development. Next slide. That's just talking more about the port. If anyone's been down to Esperance, there's a significant expansion that has been put in, and there's also potential to, and the government I think is penciling a further expansion, and we've got a very receptive environment for some of the authorities. With some, I think the nickel has been halted, the nickel being shipped out of there from First Quantum, and with MinRes getting towards the end of their life, we see a very receptive environment for getting approvals and underpinning a new development and production program. David, I know we've sort of run through things pretty quickly, but do you want to open up to some questions?
Thanks, John. Thanks, Josh. A transformational presentation. A couple of leading questions here, so I'll jump straight into it. We don't try to hide from the hard ones. What does the executive look like going forward, should this transaction proceed? Do you have a plan for essentially who's going to run the business moving forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something that we're having, you know, a lot of discussion on. At the moment, we have a lot of hands on deck, I think, where Josh has been and his geologist, Luke Marshall, been very involved, and that's working very well at the moment. We obviously are halfway through the transaction, so you know, we see a different executive probably post-transaction, and you know, we haven't landed on it as yet, but we also you know, we're working well together, so it's not like there's a new team necessarily, but you know, we're very pleased with the way that's gone so far. You know, we're all shoulders to the wheel, and there's lots to do, so keeping very busy. But yes, we'll see some changes as we evolve and potentially complete the transaction. There's a few changes to board probably as part of that. Netley have the right to one, potentially two directors, but it just depends on the use of the best people to our disposal, and you know, how it all lays out from there.
And in terms of the tenements themselves, and you touched on it briefly, Josh, why have they not been properly explored previously?
Yeah, so most of the exploration activity that we can see on GeoView and open data is looking at lithium, or it's looking at gold. There's also, you know, some assays for other minerals, nickel, copper, but so far there hasn't been anything for iron outside of the MinRes area. There is a little bit of new drill hole data that's starting to come out. So maybe over the next, you know, bit of time, we might see a little bit of more data becoming open.
Yeah,
Are you surprised that this tenement package was available, given how prospective it is for iron ore?
For us, it's quite interesting that no one had sort of wrapped it up. I think we assumed that MinRes had already, you know, had data and explored for the area for iron, and you know, that was our assumption. I assume that was everybody else's assumption, that the iron was already sort of wrapped up and they had it, but it doesn't seem to be that case. The drill bit will confirm shortly, but yeah, it looks like, you know, we've sort of had a nice win here.
David, can I just add to that? Sorry, there's a couple of things as well. It's just before, I mean, Netley Associates had the tenements before MinRes was even in the area, so you know, that back to the Cleveland Cliffs days, they're very much in production mode, and a lot of the previous banded iron formation targets or prospects, they were sitting out of the ground, like they are these raised formations. This is underground, so it's a different type of target, and so that's probably why there hasn't been this level of exploration, and it would have gone back, you know, a few decades when that was being looked at by, say, Portman or others.
Do you start looking at scale, and do you have a view on, you know, the potential scale of the target area you're dealing with?
Yeah, there's three different targets. So the south target is the one that we're focused on currently. We're just wrapping up a bit of information to put a bit more info out to the market on the northern targets. You know, we've got a 6 kilometre strike on the south target. There's a northeast potential of about 4.5 kilometre strike. And then there's a smaller northwest target, which is in the low kilometre sort of range, but good for near-term potential. Depths, we are currently doing mag inversion down to, say, 300 metres, which is sort of what's capable for open pit. And, you know, from that, we'll have a better understanding, a more accurate understanding of the expectations of the sort of deeper potentials there, as well as with the drilling that should start in early July.
Just, David, on that, I mean, we can't talk about exploration targets, but it's in the several 100 million tonnes collectively. You just got to look at the performance rights hurdles that obviously the vendors are comfortable that hurdle is quite a significant one. So obviously, as Josh says, the truth's in the drill bit, but the targets themselves, we believe, are quite substantial.
And when do you think, there's a question here in terms of drilling, when do you think assays will start coming out? So when do you think the truth doctor will start giving us the answers that all the shareholders are waiting for?
Yeah, so in terms of the heritage, we've got to get that final report in. Everything's currently looking good. We should have that around the end of the month. Drilling commencing straight away. We've had no issues with drill rigs. There's several rigs ready to go to site if we tell them to. And at the moment, that sort of indicates as well the labs are not as full as they have been because a lot of drill rigs are sitting around. So we expect sort of 1 to 2 months time. So around late August, we should have some lab results, but we'll also have a mag sus meter to be able to confirm hematite or not on site, as well as a couple other handheld devices, PXRF, to be able to get some initial readings as an indication of iron before the lab assays come in. So, start of next month, around there through to mid next month, we should have some initial readings. Yeah, we might even do a live feed to the first drill hole.
Now, some very knowledgeable shareholders here. What is the remaining iron ore inventory, if you know it, in the Yilgarn hub controlled by MinRes?
There's a few research papers that are out by Morgan Stanley, Bell Potter, I believe it is. And also, from what we can see on the public domain, when they acquired the project in 2018, upgraded it in 2020 to 11 million tonne per annum. They had about 46 million tonnes. Since then, they've acquired a couple other of the small satellite projects, but it'll be our understanding that most of those have been mined out to date. So, not a lot of tonnes left.
And this is probably the next part of that question. And have you been in any discussions with MinRes, and do they have a contingency should they run out of ore?
I think their contingency, my personal view, is they're focused on Onslow. I think if there was some ore to be found around Koolyanobbing, they would potentially be interested. Those are discussions that we'll raise with MinRes, depending on the drill results. We have been in contact with them for about 1.5 years, and the relationship there is good. So we'll see what the drill results come in, and then we'll take it from there.
Now, this is clearly a crystal ball gazing exercise, so I'm not asking you to give any forward-looking statements, but should a discovery be made and should iron ore of a scale be found, what would it actually mean for the region in terms of current infrastructure, rail and port?
Yeah, there's probably more to that as well. So if we look at the jobs, there's about 1,000 jobs now. When MinRes took it over, there was about 400. A large portion of those 1,000 jobs live in Southern Cross. So, for the region, it means, a large portion of the population there remains employed. So, there's that aspect. Then there's, the port and rail infrastructure. There's not a lot going on that rail at the moment. So, keeping ore flowing would be good for the rail infrastructure. And, that leads down to maintenance and whatnot on the line, as well as port operations and port jobs and infrastructure in Esperance as well. So it's quite a significant project for Western Australia. If there was, a shortage or no more iron ore in the area, I think it would be quite devastating for the southern area from Koolyanobbing all the way down to Esperance.
Final question, funding. What does funding look like now, and how does that progress the project forward and the exploration activities planned?
Yeah, from Netlay's side, Forrestania has enough funding to complete the initial DD drilling, which will confirm if we've got hematite at depth or not. From there, we'll look at a larger drill program. Obviously, that costs a bit more to do. If we intersect, we would be quite confident we could potentially get some non-dilutive funding by essentially doing a transaction with Mineral Resources, for example. Given they have the infrastructure in the area, that makes sense. Otherwise, once we've confirmed hematite at depth, then we might look at doing some more funding. I don't know if John wants to add to that one.
Yeah, I agree. We're funded through this initial program. And that was the same when we entered into the project. And obviously, there's a lot of different ways that can go on a success basis. So we're confident that we're on the right track, and then you're getting into a resource sort of exploration drilling, and it's a different kettle of fish.
So just on that, last question for you, Josh. Subject to drilling, of course, how quickly could Forrestania delineate a resource of this project should the results come out as hoped?
Yeah, very, very quick. So the south target will be the main area to progress. With a rig down there, we will test the other two targets, putting a hole there. If we get positive results, we're likely to have multiple rigs on site. The initial program's RC. Throughout the course of the program, we'll look at doing some DD as well. But it's relatively fast drilling, targeting the top 90 meters or 90-meter holes, top 60 meters depth. So, near surface and quick to mining potential as well.
Well, thanks, gents. Clearly a potentially transformational project in a fantastic jurisdiction that is crying out for iron ore. And as you said, has all the infrastructure advantages already in place. And clearly the attention will be on the work of Forrestania as it looks to conduct its due diligence on this project, and subject to successful due diligence, take the project forward. So Josh, John, thanks for your time.
Thanks very much, David. Thanks, everybody.